All right, John, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to be talking with you. I'm a huge fan of Mailchimp. I remember.
I'm a huge fan as well.
That's great. I remember when I first used it, it was such a great example of delight. I remember just seeing some cool stuff, funny content, a lot of cool stuff. So maybe could you start out by telling us a little bit about your background and how you ended up at Mailchimp?
Sure, yeah, I'm super happy to be here today to talk about data and data-driven product development because my background is in data, specifically applied mathematics. I was actually brought on at Mailchimp as the first data scientist, and I was brought on at a time where we introduced a free plan. We were scaling rapidly. If you do free and you do email, you get some bad actors through the system. So we were looking for a way to use machine learning to help scale that, get the bad actors out of the system, let good people flow through. So I did that for a long time, started product managing data products, and then moved over to just product manage the rest of the application. And so that's what I do today is I run product for Mailchimp.
All right, great. And we're here to talk about being data-driven. So what does being data-driven mean to you at Mailchimp?
Yeah, it's something that we've wrestled with for a long time at Mailchimp because, like you indicated, we've got a pretty large brand personality. There's a lot of quirkiness there, a lot of fun. And when people think about data, they think of it as kind of like the death of joy.
Yes.
But it doesn't have to be that way. And the way in which we think about being data-driven from a product perspective is that it's not just about, when people think data-driven, oftentimes they just think, okay, I did some work and then I'm going to pull up a dashboard after I do the work and I'm going to see whether it moved the needle. And that's a little bit late in coming. So we start data-drivenness with, all right, when we form a team and we think about its mission that it's going to achieve right from the get-go, right? We're going to charter this team. This is their mission. How do we measure whether we're making progress against that mission, right? Like that's one of the first things you're going to ask. And then before you even start work, you're going to think about basically who are the personnel I'm putting on that team to drive that specific KPI, right? So from the moment you start talking about investment, you're going to start thinking of it in terms of a measure. And then one of the things that is really sort of dear to us and how we sort of be data-driven with how we develop product is it's not about talking to the folks on the ground and saying, okay, this is your measure, this is your goal, you better hit this or else your ass is grass. Rather, it should be about, are they ideating with respect to the measure? So when they think about, what are we going to build, is that measure first and foremost in their mind? And then whether they move the needle or not, coming back together with them and saying, what were your hypotheses and did it work out? Or if it didn't work out, what did you learn? Right? So being data-driven is much more about what did you learn and having conversations with leadership about that than it is about just holding people accountable to some very specific measured goal.
Yeah, I think data definitely makes people think of quantitative, and so the other term I heard is evidence-driven or evidence-based. Then it's kind of the qual kind of can get accommodated in there too. So okay, cool. Well, I'm sure most people here know that Mailchimp was an early leader in the email space, but you obviously expanded a lot since then beyond email. Can you tell us about that transition?
Yeah. So over the past few years, we've transitioned the product from merely an email product, a point solution, to a marketing platform for small business. And so now it's a place where a small business can go to really, what we want to do is provide anything that a small business might need to find customers, re-engage with customers, grow their audience, create sales. That can be done inside of Mailchimp. So it's meant a lot of investment in additional marketing technologies, a CRM at its core, and the way in which we made that transition, which was really sort of a 10x jump in terms of the size of the product, it was using data. Right? So one of the things we skewed toward in order to be more data-driven was, okay, if I have email, but I actually want to offer all of these marketing technologies with a CRM at its center, a CRM at its core that's going to work really well for our customers. Rather than build that CRM first, which sort of doesn't touch our customers' we're going to actually build the marketing channels first and then see how that breaks our audience management tools inside, because that's where we're going to learn is how is this breaking all the stuff we have inside of the tool, and then we'll use that to develop the roadmap for how we build a better CRM. So we actually chose to build certain aspects of the marketing platform in such a way that it would actually cause a lot of friction and would allow us to learn faster, which was a whole lot of fun. And luckily, we're sort of at the end of that journey. We now actually have a marketing platform, and we're just dialing in the experience.
And maybe, can you talk about how you got those learnings along the way a little bit?
Yeah, so we talk a lot about basically getting contact with reality as fast as possible, right? So it's something you'll hear about from a lot of product people, really no mysteries there. What is the minimum viable product or minimum viable experience for a company like MailChimp? We're very concerned about what the experience is with the product, or for some things it might be a minimum viable program, right? If you're standing up a new way of doing business. So we skew toward that. Basically, how do we gain momentum by having things touch customers as fast as possible? That allows us to generate new data sets, both quantitative and qualitative, that then help us reshape the roadmap, right? Because you can articulate a 2-year, 3-year, 5-year roadmap, but the moment you get something out the door, all that goes to hell. So you might as well try to get there as fast as possible.
Cool. And I know we talked about one of the interesting things to be more data-driven. You actually have product insights team that reports to you. Can you tell us about it, how it's structured, and why you structured it that way?
Yeah, I think it's pretty unique, but it's something I've really enjoyed about how MailChimp is structured, which is that we have a product execution side of the house. This is where product managers go, as well as project managers. And then we have another side of the product department called product insights. On that side, we have our growth team. We have all of our UX researchers, so you can think about these as sort of qualitative folks. And then we have all of our product analysts, which are sort of the quantitative side of research. They're the folks who help us instrument the application, tag it, et cetera, to bring in data, help teams define a good KPI that will actually match their more qualitative mission statement, and then keep an eye on how that's going and alert the team to hey, yeah, this is moving, this is not moving, these hypotheses are not working, et cetera. So all of those insights personnel, the UX researchers, the product analysts, and growth folks, they all sit together on the product department, and that has created lots of opportunities for qualitative folks like UX researchers and quantitative product analysts to talk, which is really awesome. Because when you do qualitative research, you can get basically a bad answer to the exact question you're asking. And by bad, what I basically mean is a low N, right? If I want to know exactly why folks are doing something, I can talk to 5 people. I can recruit them, I can go to their place of business and be like, hey, why did you do blah? And they will tell you exactly why they did it, why they were feeling the way they were feeling, what time, all that stuff. But if you use quantitative, you can get a really, really good answer, so think millions of data points, to the wrong question. Sometimes there's a question you'll ask, like, why did they do X? And a product analyst will be like, I can't tell you why, but I can tell you where it was in this journey or this funnel, right? And so having those 2 folks on the same team, you get a really low fidelity answer to the right question and a really high fidelity answer to the wrong question, and you can kind of smash them together in conversation, and it makes everyone a whole lot smarter.
Sounds good. And we're at a growth conference. I know as growth has become more prominent in product some people struggle with how those 2 teams work together and kind of interact and kind of row in the same direction. So can you tell us your advice on dealing with those challenges? Yeah, so the way that we treat growth at MailChimp, it's actually no different than we treat any other product team, which is kind of interesting. What defines growth for MailChimp is merely the KPIs that product team measures, right? So the growth team looks at activation, they look at conversion, they look at retention. They've got very specific revenue-driven KPIs, but then the way in which they operate is the same in terms of, they're using A/B tests like everyone else, right? They've got engineers, they've got designers, they have all the staff that any other team would have. They have product managers. It just so happens that their mission is focused on particular measures and that they skew a little bit more toward iteration rather than sort of big new innovations, right? Because of their mission statement, they would shy away from, hey, in order to get to MVP, it's going to take us 4 months. That's not really a growth team thing. That's often some other type of team. Even if it's looking at revenue, that might actually go to something more like our revenue product team that works on big billing capabilities, right? But in terms of how they work, in terms of the staff that we use, it's very similar to any other product team. And that's super great because what it does is it allows growth behaviors to move over to other product teams, right? So,
you would look at a growth team and be like, man, they're really good at iterating, they're really good at running tests, they're really good at ideating against their measures of success, right? So, hey, we really care about retention. What are the big drivers of churn? There's voluntary churn, but man, look at all this involuntary churn. Let's look at that. Oh, some of that's credit card failure in certain developing nations. How can we address that? What other payment providers can we use? And you actually see that ideation process take place all the way from a high-level measure down to something specific. If that growth team is operating just like any other product team at the company, other product teams will look at that and say, I want to do what they're doing. And so we've enjoyed a lot of success with that by setting them all up to kind of be equal.
Cool. It sounds like, I mean, one of the challenges is when you have a PM and a growth person on the same team, it sounds like, would it be fair to call them growth PMs, basically?
That's what we do.
Okay, great.
So we have product managers on the product management team that are just called growth product managers. Okay. It can be any product manager, right? The skill set is not that different. There are some people that just happen to like growth stuff.
Right.
And so they become our growth product managers, and they, if someone's like, you know what, I actually want to do a little bit more sort of big innovation, they could move off of growth somewhere else. So they move back and forth.
Okay, that sounds good. And then so you've got the quant, you got the growth, and you got UX research. That's another area where some teams struggle with. How do we, should the PMs be doing the research? Do we have a research team? How do we share the insights? How do we design the study? So what advice do you have on how those two teams work well together?
Yeah, so one thing that we've learned at Mailchimp, we've tried many different things when it comes to qualitative research. One thing we've learned is that qualitative research or experience with customers, right? You're with customers, that should be a shared experience. So what you don't want to do is just relegate qualitative research to the professionals, right? The professional's job, the UX researcher's job, should actually be to bring other folks working on the product into conversation with the customers. And there's a lot of things to do there around, all right, let's figure out what problem we're trying to solve, and then how do we ask the right questions, right? So the interview plan, or how do we recruit the right users that can actually answer those questions so they can set up the environment in which everyone can learn from a piece of qualitative work, but then you bring the other folks into it. And so the way that we've talked about that at Mailchimp is that we call it the dream problem that we're trying to solve, which is if I go to bed at night and I have a dream and it's something super kooky, right? So I have a dream that I was baked inside of a chocolate chip cookie and I popped my head out and looked around, I was about to be ducked into a cup of milk or whatever. And I have this dream. I go into work, I tell people I work with, man, I had this dream, I was a chocolate chip cookie. No one gives a shit because everyone has weird dreams, right? That's just like, we all have weird dreams. It's, oh, that's kind of interesting as a dream. If you have a dream where you bring other people along and they share in that experience, then they're all like, we were all chocolate chip cookies, and they get really excited about it. So we try to solve this problem we had at Mailchimp where a UX researcher would have a dream, right? They'd talk to some people at their place of business, they'd be super pumped. They'd bring it back to Mailchimp, they'd tell everyone was like, I wasn't there, I don't care. So what we've tried to do is actually tighten that, where people come along for the UX research, they share in that experience, and then they debrief immediately, and they change their plans on what they're going to work on immediately. There is no report writing, there is no take a month to debrief. We do all of that together immediately. The UX researcher is responsible for making that happen.
Yeah, and I think it's great. I think the dream thing, I would kind of characterize it as firsthand evidence versus second hearsay evidence, right?
Exactly.
It's basically like hearsay. And I think you're right. It sounds like the way you're doing is great. I see a lot of other teams, largely because the PM is too busy, they'll delegate to the researcher. Researcher go off and do it, they'll come back, and I feel like so much of that rich qualitative data gets left on the cutting room floor when you get a little summary report, right?
That's one of the challenges with being a product manager is that product managers do get super busy, right? They're going to get snowed under. And one of the unfortunate things there is when you get really busy as a product manager, you actually start giving up all of the most important work, right? So what are some things I think are most important as a product manager? It would be getting in front of customers, and that could be both qualitatively and quantitatively, right? So you need to be talking to customers. You need to be looking at your own metrics. Don't just lean on your analyst. And you need to be inside the product using the product. It's amazing how fast that little bit of information, which is just sort of personal, first-person use of your own product, how quickly that gets dropped when you get busy, right? Because in order to attend stand-ups, in order to deliver documents, in order to do demos, all these things, you may not actually have to spend time like, let me just go log in and see what the hell is up with this. Does it even work? That can get dropped. So we have to be really clear at Mailchimp with like, you know what? You're going to be busy. These are the top priorities, and first-hand learning is right at the top.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Well, like a lot of companies that start out as startups and then they grow, they start out kind of with more of a tops-down kind of way of operating, and then as you grow, that doesn't scale. And so I know you've transitioned to more of a bottoms-up way of doing it. Can you, and I know people struggle with that, can you tell us how you've made that work there and how you approach it?
Right, yeah, this is really interesting. So as a company grows, and so Mailchimp at this point is a little over 1,000 employees. There's a lot going on. We've got most of the company on product teams building stuff. And it used to be the case that I knew what was going on. I talked to customers, I was in the weeds, and you could be a little bit more top down because you felt like leadership was informed. Now we're all dumb because we're spending a lot of time thinking about how we organize the company, how we put in new practices, new processes, and who's actually talking to the customer? Well, it's the folks on the ground, right? So you want to start being bottom up because they're the people who are having contact with your customer. So then the question is, how do you dock with leadership in that? And that's where KPIs come into play, right? So I don't want to dock with a product team based on an actual build this for me, right? Because whatever I say is probably going to be stupid, or at least not be the best it could be. Instead, what we say is, all right, here's your charter as a team, here's your staff, let's talk about what you're going to measure to say whether you're successful or not. And that's where we'll have most of the conversation, is all right, what are you going to measure and how are you going to actually squat up around that measurement? So this is what you want to drive. Here's how you're moving your personnel around to drive that. And then what are you doing to ideate against that measure? And all of that comes from the team, and they basically just bounce it off leadership. And it's my job to hold folks accountable, not to, did you move that needle, but rather, are you running a process that is being genuine to that measure? You're actually keeping it in your mind, and that's how you're coming up with the work that you're going to do.
Cool. And is there a way you try to get alignment on what's a reasonable goal versus unreasonable versus stretch goal for those KPI metrics?
Yeah, I love, we actually like to push our teams a little bit to come up with sort of the big, hairy goal, right? The BHAG, I think it comes up a lot, right? Because once again, what I'm holding you to is, are you generating hypotheses to try to achieve that, and what are you learning? So then, yeah, go ahead and create a big-ass goal, right? Because it's not about did you hit it or not per se. If a team is running a process where they're actually hypothesizing, this is how we're probably going to get there, we'll see that. And we'll be like, all right, you're doing what you're supposed to do. And if the goal isn't large enough, then the hypotheses can be kind of lame, right? All of a sudden you're changing button colors, you're moving stuff around in your IA, but you're not thinking through how you might innovate or do something new and exciting. So we encourage people to go after big goals.
So setting small goals leads to more incrementalism.
That's right.
If you want to get big ideas.
That's right.
BHAG, moonshots.
BHAG, that's right.
All right, cool, John. Well, thanks a lot for sharing your advice with us here today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I need some traction. You need some traction. Let's get some traction.